And what is going on, members of the J Area? Welcome back to another episode of the J Area Wrestling Show here on a Thursday night. So, we had to go back in our time machine and conduct a little bit of a throwback Thursday stream. I talked about in recent streams about bringing back the dark side of wrestling. We had those episodic streams that we did early on in the inception of the J Area Wrestling Show here. Took a little bit of a hiatus, but by popular demand, we had a poll up on YouTube, and overwhelmingly, a lot of you wanted to see that return back here onto the live streams. I'm thinking in order to conduct it in a more concise and consistent manner, we'll probably do once a month. A once a month live stream talking about the dark side of wrestling. Of course, with this week's topic being one of, if not the greatest tag teams of all time, the Road Warriors, or the Legion of Doom, depending, of course, when you were watching and what name they were going by. I do want to give people here, of course, an opportunity to join the live stream as we see more members of the audience come into the chat. Please make sure you leave a comment or a question in the chat, and we'll try to get to each of them as we go over the course of these next 60 minutes. I know it's a little bit of a later stream. Typically, I'm about an hour earlier than what I'm on right now. But being, of course, that the NFL is back, I wanted to see if I was able to get away with an hour later and see how it would do amongst the audience. I do see our new friend in the chat here, LJ, had commented, Jose, I hope you have a good day because my internet goes out at 11:30 p.m. and I wish I could make it, but I can't. Have a great time on the live stream. I appreciate that for you taking the time out of your day to comment that in the chat, LJ. All good, no worries. Hopefully you'll be able to catch the replay of the live stream. Of course, with every live stream that we have here on YouTube, we hold it up in the archives and it will be available for everybody over the course of the next, forever, really. It's going to be always available. So if you're not able to attend the live streams as they are going on, they will be available in the replays, and please feel free to check them out. Of course, we do also go live on Mondays, Thursdays as well, are 2 days out of the week that we go live. And of course, when a major pay-per-view or premium live event were to take place, we give our instant reaction following those shows. Of course, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way you can take part in these live streams. The only way to participate in these chats are if you are a subscriber here on YouTube. And of course, it doesn't hurt to also help out the channel in that regard as we continue to grow, as we continue to allow the J Area to become bigger and better. We just recently hit the 8,000 milestone in regards of subscriptions. We're trying to get to 10,000 by the end of the year. And with your guys' help and support, it's looking like that's very much a possibility. But we talk about support and the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors. I mean, these guys had overwhelmingly support from all across the world. These guys have traveled across all promotions. They've traveled across the places like the WWE, then known as the WWF, All Japan Pro Wrestling, the AWA, Georgia Championship Wrestling, the NWA, and of course, World Championship Wrestling. Two of the greatest tag team wrestlers of all time, to the point where they were so overly popular with the crowd. The moment the crowd would hear their music, the moment they would see the Road Warriors enter the arena, the electricity, the roar that came across the audience became known as the Road Warrior Pop. Something that all wrestlers aspire to achieve is by having that Road Warrior Pop. It's when the crowd becomes unglued. Everybody stands to their feet, comes out of their seat to see something once in a generation. Of course, there have been many tag teams that have tried to emulate, that have tried to mimic, to duplicate what the Road Warriors were. But no one has been able to really capture the essence of the Road Warriors, the legacy of the Road Warriors, second to none. And we'll get into that here during the live stream, again, giving people an opportunity to join the live stream. Hopefully everybody's doing well. Hopefully you guys are having a good Thursday. Hopefully the week has been treating you right as we head into another weekend here in this crazy thing called life. Muhammad's in the chat here. I see you, my friend. Muhammad says, at Jose Ramos Jr., hi and happy late on a Thursday and Friday Eve. Hope you're doing well, and the same with everybody here. It is hard to believe that it is technically Friday already. Truly, I've been saying these last couple of weeks, it feels like the weeks were really flying by. I don't know if it's because we're all a little bit busy, we have a little bit of time on our hands here, and we continue to move forward into the work week, or perhaps maybe it's just because we're just having too much fun. I have a lot to look forward to in my day-to-day basis, and it just feels like every day passes ever so quickly. We're here on the eve of a Friday night SmackDown that should be a monumental one. In Chicago, we know there's going to be John Cena. We know there's going to be CM Punk. Rumors and speculation of maybe somebody else popping up in the Allstate Arena. I don't deal on rumors and speculation. I want to see it to believe it. I know there's a lot of reports out there, but like I said, I'm going to wait until something actually happens. If you guys know, then you guys know. But of course, the Allstate Arena, Chicago, Illinois, not unknown to the Road Warriors, who are very synonymous with Chi-Town, with the Windy City. Hawk and Animal, two members of the Road Warriors, of course, flanked by their manager, Paul Ellering, all three members of the Hall of Fame class of 2011. Hawk, real name Mike Henstren, and Animal Joe Laurinaitis. The last name might seem a little bit familiar because he is the brother of John Laurinaitis, Johnny Ace, who of course was prevalent on WWE TV during the CM Punk angle. I'm sure many of you remember that. Of course, he was also in WCW, had some time in Japan as a pro wrestler himself, and even found himself in a little bit of hot water when it came to the Vince McMahon allegations that have surfaced over the last couple of days. But that's not the discussion here today. We're talking about the Road Warriors. The story of the Road Warriors is a fascinating one because these were two individuals that were really never meant to be in the business. They were spotted by a promoter who took an interest to their look. They had this hulking figure, very menacing, very intimidating, and thought, you know what, we could use this in the world of pro wrestling. The inspiration of the Road Warriors was from the Mad Max movie, and just the presentation of this post-apocalyptic tag team with the face paint, with the hair. And it was very notable about the hair that Animal would have, the mohawk, and then Hawk had this almost inverted mohawk, where rather down the middle, he would have it shaved down the middle with two parallel lines going across, with the idea being that when he, Hawk, and Animal would come together, put their heads together, it would form just this perfect grouping of what they were supposed to be. Years later, they would have added the spiked shoulder pads that became a staple of the presentation of the Road Warriors, and they never looked back. Like I said, they were inspired by the Road Warrior film, of course, Mad Max, starring Mel Gibson. Their finishing maneuver, the Doomsday Device, is widely regarded as one of the most popular finishing maneuvers in all of pro wrestling. So infamous that there was a time, again, allegedly, that during a little bit of a late night celebration, a lot of the boys went to the club, went to the bar, and Vince McMahon happened to join them that day and was taking finishers from other members of the roster. So the report says that he, Vince McMahon, yes, that Vince McMahon that has done a lot of crazy things over the course of the last quarter century, at least on television, behind closed doors, hey, that's for another stream. But that he would take the deadly Doomsday Device. Whether that is true or not, I mean, hey, a hell of a feat for one Vince McMahon. They would be known for the face paint. They would be known for the shoulder pads. And again, this post-apocalyptic look of the Road Warriors. But a lot of pressure mounted for both of these individuals. They were imposing forces that needed to carry on kayfabe over the course of their careers. And for some people, that pressure can amount to a lot. We knew that Mike, aka Hawk, had a little bit of a wild side to him, very outgoing, very much energetic presence. And so it is a shame to hear the stardom that these individuals, acquire over the course of their careers, only to allow outside substances, inebriate them at the best parts of their career. In 1992, the Road Warriors were a member of the WWF roster. and they were taking part at a SummerSlam event in London, Wembley. It was one of the biggest events in the company's history, an event that is still celebrated to this day. And it is said that Hawk was under the influence during this matchup for the LOD, for the Road Warriors, and it became commonplace for him to partake in these substances as a way to not only alleviate the pain, the stress, I'm sure, that he had on his own shoulders during the course of his career, but it would follow him throughout the course of his life. Every now and then he would fall into that addiction. He would fall into the struggles that prevented him from truly living a life that was fulfilled in pro wrestling. Times that he and his partner, Animal, would butt heads, and it would not only interfere with what was going on screen, but what was going on behind the scenes. And it was influencing their partnership. Animal has said it in his past that this was like a brotherhood for he and Hawk. They were traveling with each other day in, day out, years, to different countries, to different places, and they relied on each other. And that self-destruction that Hawk endured would follow him onto TV. And that would lead me to a very controversial story that the WWE would attempt to tell in 1998. See, Animal and Hawk traveled across the globe. Again, I named all the promotions. The places like GCW, Georgia Championship Wrestling, not to be confused with Game Change Wrestling, AWA, NWA, WCW, WWE. Their latest run of the WWE, they would come to them in about 97, and in 98 they would be repackaged as LOD 2000. But because of this dissension between the two, it was in 98 that they had failed to win the tag titles against the New Age Outlaws. Growings of tension would become apparent between the two. There was a new adaptation or a new attempt in the look and the presentation of the team. They would add a manager like Sonny. Then they would add Draws into the equation. If you remember Draws, he was a part of the Beyond the Mat documentary, better known as Puke. And they would incorporate him into this team, and they would sustain a losing streak of sorts, to the point where, whether you agree with it or not, a lot of times they say it is best to use reality in TV because it strikes a chord, it becomes relatable, it just seems real. And at this point in time, Crash TV was very much popular for pro wrestling. It was very much shock value. It wasn't about the match quality. It was about what can we do to elicit a reaction from the audience. Any publicity is good publicity. At least that's what they say. So they incorporate Hawk's, his issues, his demons on TV. Alcoholism, the substances that he would put into his body that inebriated him from being who a lot of people thought he would be. And so they run this angle. And in one of the more infamous moments in all of pro wrestling, there is a moment where a Hawk climbs up to the top of the Titantron during Monday Night Raw and is threatening to jump, essentially. I have to be very careful with the way I describe this because I don't want YouTube to get angry with me, but he was on top of the Titantron threatening to jump. And Animal and Paul Ellering are trying to talk him down, saying, "We love you, everyone loves you, don't do this." And it became very uncomfortable, even rewatching it all these years later. It's a very uncomfortable watch because here you are watching an individual portraying essentially a caricature of himself and the personal demons that he had to battle and had to struggle with. And it is supposed to be here on television for the entertainment of you and I. And it's very eerie watching it. So there's a moment where Draws climbs up to the top of the Titantron seemingly to help talk him down, help him get down from the Titantron. And in the angle that they're showing, he grabs the shirt of Hawk. And it appears he's trying to get a grip, but it also insinuates that he pushes him off. And it was really a moment of, hey, we're going to tell this story that Draws is trying to take over Hawk's spot in the Legion of Doom. but it was so poorly received by not only the audience, not only by wrestling pundits across the world, but just from the boys in the back, to the point where they would drop that angle and they wouldn't move forward with it. And that was a real indicator of, it was not only tasteless, it was quite disrespectful to Hawk. And I don't know how they signed off on that, or how he even signed off on that. It exploited the real life struggles of Mike. Both both objected to the idea of it, and eventually it led to the angle being dropped, which I think was probably the best case scenario. It shouldn't have gone to that point. And you guys know me, I've talked about in the past, when it comes to pro wrestling, I kind of like the shock value of pro wrestling and some of the taboo and pushing the envelope. But when it comes to this extent, it did become a little bit uncomfortable to watch, especially knowing what we do now. Real quick, I want to see in the chat here, Kevin's there. What's up, Kevin? How you doing, buddy? Glad you can join us here on the stream. We're talking the Road Warriors, their legacy, whether or not they're the greatest tag team of all time, as well as addressing the issues that one Road Warrior, Hawk, had endured throughout the case of his life. We're thinking about doing this as a monthly special maybe the first Thursday is what I'm thinking. The first Thursday of every month, we'll tackle a dark side of the ring topic as a way to kind of alleviate that necessity, that quench our thirst for a dark side episode. But hopefully you guys are enjoying that. And if you guys are enjoying it, make sure you like the video, comment down below some of your thoughts on the Road Warriors or other topics that you would like to be discussed perhaps for the next dark side live stream. Kevin in the chat says, nah, the best tag team is the Usos. Honestly, I love the Usos. I'm a big supporter of the Usos, and I think that's a great choice. I'm a little biased about my tag team, and I'll get to that in a second. I do want to share some of those tag teams, but the Usos are a phenomenal pick. Kevin also says, I honestly never watched a Road Warrior match. Oh, really? Well, hey, I mean, pro wrestling, as I've said before, is a buffet. There's a little bit of everything for everybody. The Road Warriors, if you're looking for the WWE, they've had matches against the New Age Outlaws. They've also had matches in the early 90s, of course, in the New Generation era. They were never really as popular, I think, in the WWE as they were back in the day in like WCW and the NWA and the AWA. That's really where they hit their stride. The Road Warriors, though, very instrumental in the War Games matchup. If you go back and you look up the War Games match, specifically in Jim Crockett Promotions and WCW, these guys were in a total of 12 War Games matches. Very prominent figures. They worked very closely with one American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and again, were very prominent stars of that promotion. And I'm sure you can find those matches on Peacock or on YouTube or wherever you have access to some of the archives of pro wrestling. Kevin says, were the Road Warriors always on the WWF? They were not. They were in the WWF for a few years in the early 90s. And they would return in about 97, running all the way to about, early 99. And then, of course, Road Warrior Animal would show back up in 2005 and have a short-lived tag team with Heidenreich as the new Legion of Doom, 2005. So they didn't really spend a lot of time in the WWE. They spent a lot of it outside Japan, WCW, the NWA, AWA. I would say their best matches are actually outside of the WWE. But of course, being that the WWE is like the Disney of all entertainment, it revolves around them and it comes back to them. Their best work was probably on the outside. But the Road Warriors certainly, I think, are in consideration for being some of the greatest tag teams of all time. They are 8-time tag team champions over the course of all these promotions. And the numbers itself, I don't think, are as inflated as nowadays because a lot of title flip-flopped, as well as chasing the gold and chasing legacies. But the Road Warriors certainly, I think, could be on the Mount Rushmore of tag team wrestling because they really did inspire a lot of future tag teams. I mean, you want to hear some of the names that either were inspired or drew heavy inspiration from the Road Warriors presentation. We're talking about Demolition, who were probably a carbon copy of them during their time in the 80s and 90s. The Powers of Pain, of course, being, the Barbarian and the Warlord. The Ascension in NXT took a little bit of elements of that post-apocalyptic tag team. Of course, that was Victor and Connor. The Blade Runners, who were a very young Steve Borden and Jim Hellwig, better known as Sting and the Ultimate Warrior, they took some inspiration from them as well. Of course, I think the Authors of Pain could be an argument because they had a manager named Paul Ellering, and they had like these vests on, and again, very imposing individuals, very threatening, very large, beefy men, cited by Paul Ellering. I'm reaching, but I feel like that's a little bit of an influence by the Road Warriors, personally. But again, very popular, and the memories that the LOD, the Road Warriors, have created go to a lot of what the most popular tag teams have said. For me, because I know Kevin in the chat had said the Usos. For me, I think that the best tag team of all time can be considered a tie between two tag teams. It depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for accolades and achievements, or if you're looking for influence and legacy. To me, it always comes back to the Hardy Boys and the Dudley Boys. I think if anybody were to tell me those are the two best tag teams of all time, I wouldn't argue with them. I couldn't argue with them. And when you ask Matt and Jeff, or Devon and Bubba, who are the greatest tag teams of all time, there's been interviews out there. They have said the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors. They are the undisputed GOATs of the business. At least they are your favorite wrestlers tag team, essentially. A lot of cases have been pointed out that these were the guys because they were so dynamic. They were a cohesive unit. They had the chemistry. They were credible. They were unique. They had all of these, qualities about them that would demonstrate why they became such big stars. You were watching Dark Side of the Ring, and it was described that when these guys went over to Japan, they were as big, if not bigger, depending on who you ask, as Godzilla, as a pop culture phenomenon for the Japanese audience. Now, I don't know about you, but to have the Road Warriors in the same tier as Godzilla, that is pretty impressive, if you ask me. That is pretty impressive. As I mentioned, they were an instrumental part of the War Games matchup, of course, teaming with the likes of Nikita Koloff and Dusty Rhodes. They were presented as such. They were always at the top of the card, main eventing pay-per-views, consistently being promoted as some of the top stars in the business. The Road Warriors, if not the best tag team of all time, I think certainly have earned the distinction to be involved in the conversation. But it's very difficult to do so without talking about the bad side. And that, of course, being Hawk. Hawk battled so long against his addictions, against his demons, if you will, to the point where he finally got clean. And ultimately, he would pass away, and I believe it was 2003 that he would pass away. Just around that time, it seemed that they were keen on making a comeback in the WWE between the two of them, and he was not able to do so. But rather, Road Warrior Animal would carry the mantle and again team with Heidenreich, recreating, or at least attempting to recreate, that glory day of the Legion of Doom. It wasn't the same. Of course, it was never going to be the same. But I do remember growing up watching Road Warrior Animal teaming up with Heidenreich and thinking it was cool. I liked the face paint. I liked the shoulder pads with the spikes on them. And then through them, I was able to learn about Hawk and learn about the original Road Warriors and thinking, man, these guys were really cool. And I think that's the beautiful thing about pro wrestling, is that no matter when you jump in, odds are you will always be able to find your way back towards the past and honor the legends that come before. Hawk may have had his demons and his battles, internally, but it's the work that he left behind with Animal that I think will truly live on. I wished that I could have seen these guys in their prime, just because of everything that's being said about them and all the high praise by some of my favorites. But they truly were a once in a generation, once in a lifetime tag team. And if you haven't seen their stuff, man, go out of your way, YouTube, Peacock, Netflix, whatever it is that you have, and just check out a couple matches. namely the War Games matchups. I really enjoy those early War Games matchups because they set the precedent. It may not be what we know and what we're accustomed to nowadays in the modern era of War Games, but you got to keep in mind that first few War Games matchups set the bar. And again, it was the brainchild of Dusty Rhodes, so of course, with that creativity between all individuals involved, I don't think you can go wrong with rewatching some of those matchups. Um, Dude, Shield, bro. I love the Shield too, but they're a trio. When I think a tag team, that's two individuals. So if you were to break up the Shield in like Seth and Dean, or Roman and Seth, or Roman and Dean, I still think I would put over the Road Warriors. But as a trio, the Shield certainly are up there. Certainly are up there. Reese says, "What's up? What's going on, Reese? How you doing, buddy? Glad to see you on the stream. Appreciate you stopping by. A little bit of a later stream, but hey, we're here nonetheless. I'm hoping that everyone's doing well, and I'm glad that you were able to find us here on another edition of the J Area Wrestling Show. Of course, it's a Thursday night, one day, depending where you're watching, one day before Friday Night SmackDown, a very important Friday Night SmackDown, I feel like this episode here, we're going to get a few surprises, and I think you guys know what I'm talking about. But also, I feel like it's going to be a big episode to help build WrestlePalooza, the first ever premium live event that will be taking place on the ESPN direct-to-consumer app. I know I got my subscription because, one, I'm not going to stop watching pro wrestling, but also, I'm a big fan of football, basketball, baseball. So it really is a done deal for me when I heard about that deal coming up. Of course I'm going to watch it. Dethroned by Eli in the chat. What's going on, buddy? How you doing? Glad to see you. We're talking about the Road Warriors. Just got through my little soliloquy, my little preamble about the Road Warriors. If you missed it, please go ahead and do yourself a favor. Rewatch the live stream. Of course, it'll be available in the archives following its conclusion here on YouTube. I would love to hear from you guys in the chat, though, on what you thought about the Road Warriors, or what are some questions that you have in regards to pro wrestling, whether it is AEW, WWE, TNA. You guys know the deal. Any questions, any comments, please feel free to share them in the chat, and we'll get to them as we go for the next half hour, really. Another half hour here. Of course, my favorite 60 minutes of the day, being here live with you guys, talking shop, talking pro wrestling. It's truly, I think, the best part of the whole content creation journey that we're here on YouTube. Of course, in regards to the channel as well, I do want to help plug the handles. We are live on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. You can find those handles here at @JAreaPod_ on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. These are your other opportunities to get updates on the channel, as well as other forms of media on the channel as well. Dethroned by Eli says, "Did you catch the new CVV episode?" I have. It was the Maven episode. I just caught up. There was a time being where I slipped a little bit behind, but I caught up. Just finished the Maven episode earlier today while I was out for a run. So I love Chris Van Vliet stuff, man. The way he approaches his interview style, it comes off as a conversation, and it really feels like he's not even interviewing these individuals. It's just a straight up talk, and we just happen to be clued in hearing about Maven and his journey and his content creation, how he creates videos. I didn't even realize that he had an actual job outside of it, but he does. He works in finance, he said. Listening to the stories about him in Tough Enough and him in wrestling, and it's fascinating to hear about like the mid-carders, for example, and I don't mean that in any derogatory sense. We always talk about guys like Stone Cold, The Rock, The Undertaker, the big names, but it's also interesting to listen to, again, the mid-carders, the guys who aren't really at the top, but are amongst some of the other stars in the company. So I always welcome those type of episodes, and I look forward to every CVV episode because it's always so enlightening to see how he approaches the topics at hand. Dethroned by Eli says his stolen trophy, yeah, and how there was a guy who tried to offer to sell the trophy back to him. That's crazy, but he declined because he's like, "What am I gonna do with that trophy?" Shout out to Maven, he seems like a cool dude. Gabs, what's going on? Gabs says you finally brought my favorite episodes back. I had to. One, they were fun. I mean, saying that out loud, you're talking about dark pieces of conversation that's not necessarily fun, but it was an engaging conversation. I felt like it was really the foundation of what the live streams were built on. We were doing those Dark Side of the Ring episodes and talking about, you know, how pro wrestling may be a glamorous form of entertainment on TV. There is a dark side to every story. The Road Warriors are no different. Not perfect individuals by any means. I mean, who is, except for Kurt Hennig? But I think it's very important to discuss these kind of topics. It's almost as if it's a cautionary tale for people who are pursuing greatness, who are pursuing the limelight and all this attention, to recognize that, hey, there are outside forces or substances out there that could take hold and influence our minds and influence our decision making, and ultimately it's up to us to hold ourselves accountable. The only concern I had with the Road Warriors and Hawk's substance issue was the way it was presented on TV. If you're just joining us here on live, we talked about how in 1998 the WWE had ran an angle with the Road Warriors, Animal and Hawk, and it was well documented that Road Warrior Hawk had issues with alcohol and substances. And they took it to TV and they presented it as a legitimate storyline that showed him struggling both internally with himself, but also having tension with his tag team partner, to the point where he would climb up the Titantron and would threaten to jump off. And I've said in the past that when it comes to edgy TV and that shock value TV, I find it interesting because it gives us that sense of a feeling of like, hey, should I be watching this? It's almost like a sense of you're doing something you shouldn't be. But when it came to the Road Warrior Hawk jump angle, it became uncomfortable, because knowing what we know now, this is a man's real life, real struggles, real insecurity, real pain being projected on TV for the global audience to enjoy his entertainment. That doesn't sit well with me, even if he signed off on it. And it's been said before that he and Animal, they objected to it. They really didn't want to do that angle. But even if he signed off on it, still should not have been done. I personally feel like it should not have been done. But of course, Gabs, I had to bring it back. We were talking about doing it maybe as a monthly special, the first Thursday of every month, to have some sort of a Dark Side of the Ring topic. I wanted to talk about this just because I think the Road Warriors are one of the coolest tag teams of all time, but also because it would be like a little soft relaunch into the topic. If you guys have any other suggestions or topics that you would be interested in, or maybe a kind of conversation that you would like to have, and maybe I can look into the stories that would maybe match up with that request, we could do that. Otherwise, I will go about it the way I have usually, and that is a poll. And just throw up a poll up there and see what are some of your guys' interests. And I feel like I'm going to do that more so as a YouTube membership exclusive opportunity to really give people that opportunity to have a say in the future uploads of the channel. So I'm hoping you guys enjoy the Dark Side of the Ring topics. The reason I also wanted to go once a month is because I didn't want to shoot through all of them. Because can you imagine what, in maybe 3 months, 4 months time, if I were to do them every Thursday, we would have no more to talk about. Now, granted, there's probably a lot more that I have to go deep digging in, but I feel like once a month would be just fine. It gives you guys an opportunity to enjoy the other content that we have here on YouTube, but also it gives me a month to kind of prepare, research, and even give you guys that opportunity to allow your input or vote for the topics at hand. And I've always said it's back and forth. This is a community that we've helped build together. I want to incorporate your guys' opinions, your thoughts, as much as I can when it comes here, because not only do I think it's the right thing to do, giving you guys that voice, being that it is the J area, it's all of us here together, but also because it does kind of make it easier for me, because it lets me know, hey, this is what the people want. This is what the people want to hear. So who am I to not give that? Who am I to not provide that? So again, anytime you have questions, comments, or suggestions, you guys already know, throw them in the chat, throw them in the comments. I try to get to as many of them as I can. I will confess, those who are Main Event Mafia members and have their names highlighted with the icon to the side, they do get first priority replies in the comments. So anytime you see someone like Gabs who has a highlighted name, as well as that championship title right beside their name, just know that's because they're a member of the Main Event Mafia. Dethroned by Eli says, I watched Rene Dupree's show, mostly for Paul London stories. You ever watch / listen to him? I'm aware of his content. I will confess I don't really watch him. I have passed by it, scrolling on the YouTube and getting lost in the wormhole that is pro wrestling on YouTube. But I can't say I've seen his stuff. I know he makes content, but I haven't watched a lot of the Rene Dupree stuff. I barely get to any of the Maven stuff, and that doesn't mean I'm not avoiding it, but I do get served it and it comes across. But keep in mind, dude, there's a lot of content out there. I try to save as much as I can and get through it throughout the day, but between all the wrestling that's going on, like for example Impact is today, and I haven't seen what happened on Impact yet. We'll probably catch that either tomorrow or Saturday morning when I can fit that in my schedule. But also, we all gotta work. If it was up to me, this would be the full-time job, just talking pro wrestling with all you guys, but we're not there yet. So maybe one day, and I would just be a hermit talking about the crazy world of pro wrestling. But I do appreciate you guys joining me here on this journey, on this venture. Dethroned by Eli goes on to say, my brother says the mid-cards make themselves sound more involved than they really were. I mean, I'm not going to argue that. I feel like maybe it depends on who it is. Of course, I feel like there's some people out there, like Maven. From what I've heard, what I've listened, he doesn't really put himself over too much as if he was, like the next big thing. But I would understand if there are some of those that felt slighted, that maybe felt like they deserved more of an opportunity on the main roster, so they want to put themselves over. Ultimately, that's what pro wrestling is getting over. And these guys are pro wrestlers at heart. You can take the pro wrestler out of wrestling, but you're never really going to take the wrestling out of the pro wrestler. And they're going to continue to put themselves over, whether it's for the benefit of them or the detriment of others. Dethroned by Eli says, Chavo and Gregory Helms are two great examples of. I haven't heard too much of Chavo Guerrero. Gregory Helms, I will say his Twitter, I do find kind of funny. He does have this like sarcastic tone on Twitter, but Chavo, I haven't really heard a lot of his input or his story in pro wrestling. I don't really feel like we got enough of Chavo. I would like to hear more, truthfully. But we do have a big episode of Friday Night SmackDown this upcoming week. John Cena makes his return to the Allstate Arena, to Chicago, a place that he had debuted way back when, June 27th, 2002, answering the open challenge of Kurt Angle. If you guys remember that matchup, let us know in the chat. If you haven't seen that matchup, go ahead and check it out. Not a bad showing for a rookie John Cena. It was against Kurt Angle, so I mean, come on. He might have did a little bit of carrying there. But Chicago's always a great crowd. Looking forward to the show. Can't wait. Next time we'll be going live, though, will be on Monday following Monday Night Raw, as we inch closer and closer to WrestlePalooza, which I'm anticipating to be a very, very big pay-per-view, very big premium live event. The first of its kind on the ESPN direct-to-consumer app. They gotta deliver. It was also said that they are going to go head-to-head with AEW's next pay-per-view, All Out. But apparently now they have moved up the pay-per-view for AEW, and it will now be going head-to-head with the WWE. One, I want to say thank you. Two, that might be the best case scenario. If you're going to make people choose, unfortunately, I think they're going to side with the WWE just because it's a larger appeal to the audience and also the name brand and how familiar the casual fan may be with the WWE. But because they moved it up, that gives me an opportunity to actually watch both shows. I am very passionate about the fact that I hate the idea of head-to-head programming. Don't make me choose. I want to see it all. I want to watch it all. But you put them up against each other, then you're making me choose. And it can make it a little bit difficult for me to go live following the show when another show is going on. And I kind of want to talk about that too. So our live stream. If you're just joining us here on live, my name is Jose Ramos Jr., fan of professional wrestling, conducting a pro wrestling channel for wrestling fans alike. We do go live on Mondays and Thursdays. Typically Monday is the J Area Wrestling Show. We talk about Monday Night Raw and the recap, as well as whatever is going on in the world of pro wrestling. And then Thursdays are our variety episodes. Sometimes it's going to be Dark Side of the Ring. Sometimes it is a topic such as the Road Warriors, maybe a predictions video, or any type of story that really fits the build of pro wrestling at that time. Occasionally we will go live following a pay-per-view or a premium live event, so always make sure to have your notification bell on. That way you are notified when the J Area goes live. It is always a genuine pleasure to see you guys out here on YouTube hanging out with me talking pro wrestling, as only we do here on YouTube. It has been a growing passion of mine here as we continue to explore the world of pro wrestling on YouTube. There are so many other options. I will say it's a very competitive field here, but I can't stress enough how appreciative, how grateful, and how thankful I am that you guys continue to choose to spend your time here with us on YouTube. It's a grand pleasure to talk with you guys, and it also lets me know, hey, there's people out there with a similar sense and taste in pro wrestling as me. And even if you don't, some people here in the chat have told me before they don't like AEW. They don't like the WWE. They're not a fan of TNA, but that's okay. That's okay. We don't all have to like the same thing, and that was the point of creating this channel, was to give a voice to the people out there who want to talk about pro wrestling, have their opinions, have their questions be heard, because maybe there's some things that I'm not a fan of that you are, and you could put me on. For example, we've had a lot of people in the chat in the past talk about places like MLW and GCW. I'm not as well, versed or knowledgeable about those promotions, but it's because of the conversations that we have here. You guys keep me in the loop, and I appreciate that. And that's what this was always intended to be. That conversation, that camaraderie formed between fans alike. A lot of times you're going to hear, creators talk about their fans. I don't consider you guys fans. I consider you guys my peers. I consider you guys my friends and fellow members of the J Area. We continue to stride towards our goal of 10,000 subs by the end of the year, and it's looking really good. You guys have shown up and shown out for these live streams and the videos. We recently have been getting a little bit more traction when it comes to the shorts and TikToks and the reels that we've been uploading, trying to get a little more traction on the other social sites as well, to try to bring more people here onto the YouTube so they can join in on the fun that is the J Area Wrestling Show. I appreciate each and every one of you. Not signing off just yet, but I always want to go out of my way and make sure you guys know, hey, all love on my part. Make sure you guys drop in some questions and any comments you have here. Be a part of the conversation, join the discussion, and help direct where we go moving forward with the live stream. Otherwise, I'm going to keep talking about the Road Warriors, Animal and Hawk, who, as I said before, but if you're just joining us, just joined the live stream, very instrumental part of pro wrestling, especially in the tag team division. Tag team wrestling is an art when done right. It is another layer of storytelling that cannot be conducted, obviously, with just one-on-one matches. You are now relying on the chemistry between two people and having to drive a story as they attempt to take on a tag team of another two people. And with imposing forces like Animal and Hawk, it can be difficult to tell a compelling story because these guys were world beaters. But sometimes in pro wrestling, you have everybody play a role. You have the dominant champions that can't be beaten. You have the plucky underdog that the crowd gets behind. And then sometimes you just have these forces of nature that are like the Road Warriors. Every town that they went into, every town, they had the Road Warrior pop, where fans would get out of their seats, where fans would roar and let you know that they wanted to be heard when Animal and Hawk entered the arena. It has not been done since. It may not ever happen again to have a tag team as over as the Road Warriors, a cultural phenomenon when it came to pro wrestling. For those joining us again, they were heavily inspired by Mad Max of course played by Mel Gibson way back when, with the post-apocalyptic gear, the shoulder pads with the spikes on. They really were one of the coolest tag teams of all time. Let me know in the chat though, who are some of your favorite tag teams of all time? We've had Kevin here say that the Usos are the greatest tag teams of all time. Another individual here, Dude B, says the Shield. I personally would consider them a trio, but hey, I'd love to hear it. Me, I'm always going to be a little bit biased for the Hardy Boys, but I do think that the Dudley Boys are just right there. I really do. Dudleys and the Hardys, any combination of those two at the top, and I would not argue. Reese in the chat says the Road Warriors, the Night of the Skywalker with the Midnight Express. The Midnight Express, again, another tag team, a legendary tag team. That doesn't get talked about enough, I feel, especially amongst like the younger audience. You know, a lot of people, especially in this day and age, we just go straight to the Hardys because they were cool. But there are people, as Gabs literally says, the Hardys. I totally agree with you. But the Midnight Express, the U.S. Express, I mean, those guys, again, give them their due. They set the table. They paved the way for teams like the Hardys. You could even argue the Freebirds. I know that's technically a trio, but they were the tag team champions for a bit there, developing the Freebird rule where 3 individuals could be a tag team champion as they would revolve around the 3 individuals. Gab says the Hardys, and I am fully on board. I've always been a Hardy Boy fan. Growing up with my younger brother, San Fran, we always envisioned ourselves as younger Hardy Boys. Of course, he was always Jeff, and I was Matt. Totally fine. I like Matt. Love Jeff, though. And as they're the tag team champions for TNA, they're not slowing down just yet. Also, speaking of the Dudleys and the Hardys, they're going to have their scheduled matchup at Bound for Glory this October, one last time. So you better believe I'll be checking that out to give that last hurrah to Bubba Ray, Devon, Matt, and Jeff, the Hardys. A throwback to way back when. And I find it very ironic that when Matt and Jeff Hardy are going to be taking on the Dudleys, Devon and Bubba Ray, it happens to be taking place during the same time that Adam Copeland, aka Edge, and Christian Cage have gotten back together, meaning Edge and Christian, Dudleys, the Hardys, all 3 teams, all 6 individuals that took part in the first set of TLC matches are all back together. Now, if that's not poetry, I don't know what is. Reese says for a short time, Doom Together was a great team. Oh yeah, Butch Reed and Ron Simmons. Harlem Heat. Shout out to Harlem Heat, by the way. Stevie Ray and Booker T. Harlem Heat, one of the best tag teams to ever come out of WCW, who was known to have some pretty solid tag teams. I mean, you had the Steiners, you had the LOD, you had Harlem Heat. I love this shout out to Doom, though. Ron Simmons, a.k.a. Farouk, with the APA. Butch Reed, a menacing force. Theodore Long. Remember Teddy Long? He was also there. Shout out to him. He knew talent. Dudeby says the Shield, top 5. I hear you. But I just don't know for tag teams. Because for me, if I were to rack off 5 tag teams, no particular order, because I'm just going to name them, I think you have to include, like I said, Hardys and Dudleys, the Road Warriors. I would go as so far to name Harlem Heat, because I really think in terms of the grand scheme of WCW, the accomplishments that those guys had, second to none. And for the 5th and final team, I mean, that one could be a revolving door around anybody. For me, in my biased opinion, I was a very big fan of the Hart Foundation, Brett and Jim Neidhart. So that might be my top 5. But of course, upon further review, upon further evaluation, of course there's going to be another tag team where you're like, oh my god, yeah, of course. How could I not name this tag team? Muhammad says, I wish Copeland and Christian Cage aren't like, okay, I'm going to get to Muhammad real quick. But Reese pulls out, again, the Brainbusters, Arn and Tully. Of course. Arn and Tully. I would be remiss not to say the Usos, who we talked about earlier. I think the Usos very much should be in consideration for that as well. You could even say Edge and Christian. I personally think Dudleys and Hardys are better teams than them, but that doesn't mean that they're not great in their own regard. I know some people are gonna be, pushing back. You could argue the Young Bucks. I know there's gonna be a large portion that are gonna say no, not the Bucks, but I think there is an argument to be made based off of the influence and the legacy that those two are gonna leave behind here in pro wrestling. Muhammad says, "I wish Copeland and Cage had a match. They will be AEW All Out taking place in, I believe, Toronto. They're going to be having a matchup against FTR. That should be a banger of a matchup. FTR versus Edge and Christian. Dude, sign me up. They had a pretty good matchup, I thought, at Forbidden Door against Kip Sabian and Killswitch. Love the finish. The whole pop-up spear. That was cool. Reese's Demolition. Again, another solid tag team. I was never a Demolition fan just because I thought they were too close to the Road Warriors. But absolutely. Who else thinks the Tribal Chief gimmick is stale? You know what? I just think it's because we've seen so much already with Roman. He, first of all, doesn't have a bloodline anymore. No wise men. The Usos are his cousins, yeah, but it's not really the same. I do think I'm afraid that Roman might fall into the trap that Charlotte Flair was for so long, and there's no evolution of the character. Now, you could make the argument that he still maintained the same foundation that he's built, way back when they first started the Tribal Chief gimmick. But you could make the argument the only change has been he's kind of a good guy. I wouldn't necessarily say he's a full babyface because he still maintains a lot of the same characteristics of a heel Roman Reigns. I just don't want him to fall into that boat of not evolving. Muhammad says, I mean with the Hardys and Dudleys. That would be pretty cool. Highly unlikely, but that would be pretty cool to have them all back together. Bring a new gimmick for him. Like what? What could we do with Roman that hasn't been done? I think this iteration of the character certainly is a step up from where he was the big dog. That in itself was just god awful, if I'm going to be quite honest. So I feel like we are in the best case scenario. Where could they go with it? Because you're not going to turn him heel. I think we don't have enough to work with Roman as a heel. We've already done that for years. But then you have to think about once he's finished with Seth, Braun Breaker, Bronson Reed, where does he go from there? Does he go back to Cody? Competing for the championship? A possibility. But truthfully, I don't know if I want that. For Roman, at least. Rock? The Rock would be a choice, but I don't know if they're going to go through with that anymore. It might be too late. Muhammad had any chance of Nick Nemeth and Nikki Bella being a couple or romantically connected again? I don't think so. Again, I can't speak on their personal relationships. I only speak on what we see in pro wrestling. So I don't know what their chemistry was like behind closed doors. Is there a possibility? Sure. Never say never, I suppose. But given the interaction between them during the interviews on Busted Open and the camaraderie that we see online, I don't know. I don't know if they would get back together. But again, you can never rule it out, right? It's a possibility. I just feel like it strikes me as the kind of thing where been there, done that. They don't want to revisit that. But of course, I can't speak to that. I don't know how their relationship was in real life. We're going to be going live here for about another few minutes here. So make sure you guys drop in your comments, drop in the chat, your questions, anything you guys want to talk about here as we begin to close on another edition of the J Area Wrestling Show here on a Thursday, following an episode, or rather following a game of Thursday Night Football, the first Thursday Night Football of the 2025 season. You know your boys, I got to be following. I do actually want to share something with you guys. I talked about this on Monday's stream. I want to get back into reading. I'm very much into podcasting, and listening and watching documentaries, but I want to get back into reading. And I talked about these books that I had purchased from Amazon. Shout out to Amazon. And they are pro wrestling autobiographies that I do want to share with you guys. Again, I want to get back into my reading. So one that I got that I was really looking forward to just because of the longevity and the significance that this individual has had on the business, but had to get one of Jim Ross, the original JR, not to be confused with Jose Ramos Jr. He has a book, Slobber Knocker, My Life in Wrestling. I had to pick this up. He has other books as well, but this is the one that I found interesting, talking about the early years of his career as well as his own personal life, and that's what I'm really interested in, is finding out about the people behind the scenes, behind the camera. So very much looking forward to this one. Haven't started just yet. Also, because they've been hyping it up for so long, and I hear a lot of good things about it, had to pick up my own copy of The Man, Becky Lynch, her memoir. I've heard really good things about it. Looking forward to reading this as well, and the candid story of Becky Lynch, who I am a fan of. I think she's one of the best wrestlers in the world when it comes to the women's division. I think she's one of the best. And of course, this is a book I've been interested in, just never ended up picking it up. But given the latest bit of news, rumors, reports, I also picked up the autobiography of AJ Lee, AJ Mendez, as her real name. Crazy is My Superpower. A really good book. I picked it up on Tuesday, and I'm already a little bit over halfway done. A fantastic read, I will say. So I'm looking forward to reading all of these. When I get to finish them, I'll be sure to let you guys know what I thought. Muhammad asks, will Chavo Guerrero Jr. and Vicky Guerrero ever go back to the WWE? I don't see them interact anymore. Well, I mean, in a public setting, we don't. But again, we can't speak to that because we don't know them personally. I would like to think that Vicky and Chavo talk outside, in their own personal life. Again, I don't know that to be certain or not, but I would hope so. Vicky Guerrero has been a polarizing figure the last couple of years, given her relationship with her daughter, given the circumstances of her own personal life. There were times where we didn't think she'd be back in the WWE, but they've brought her back. I think for Vicky, only for those one-off appearances, like the reunion shows, those are the only times I could actually see her. Chavo, I don't even think if he'd go back. He doesn't have to. He doesn't need to go back. But if he does, I feel like it would just be for some kind of, again, a reunion show, something like that. I don't think they would put him in the Hall of Fame. I love Chavo, but I don't think they would put him in the Hall of Fame. Vicky, maybe. But I just don't know. The answer I would always give you, Muhammad, is never say never. As of right now, though, I don't think they need to go. Vicky more likely than Chavo. Vicky more likely than Chavo, I will say. But as we bring insert himself in the Dominic, well, I mean, he can't necessarily insert himself. They'd have to work that out. But even then, I mean, there was no really interaction between Chavo and Dominic. And what would be the reason for him being involved? If we're brainstorming, would it be one of those things where it's like he takes Dominic under his wing, and consider himself a Guerrero rather a Mysterio because he's the son of Eddie? Could he go about it a heelish way, saying you're leeching off of Eddie's legacy? I suppose there's ways you could do it, but I just don't think it would be long term. It would probably, again, be like a one-off. I don't see Chavo doing a long-term thing with the WWE. Doesn't have to. Doesn't need to. But again, never say never. In the world of wrestling, things can truly change on a dime. So, who knows? Not me, but I appreciate the question, Muhammad. Would I like to see him back? Absolutely. I loved Chavo growing up. I thought he was one of the best wrestlers on SmackDown. Certainly one of the more entertaining wrestlers as well, with that heelish tendency that he would have as a gimmick. I would love to see it. I just find it very difficult to see it happen, truthfully. But hey, I want to thank you guys for joining us here on another edition of the JR Wrestling Show, the best 60 minutes here on YouTube for me, personally. I do appreciate the support. I do appreciate the time out of your guys' day to hang out with me, talking about pro wrestling. We will be going live again this upcoming Monday, following Monday Night Raw, to discuss the fallout of that show, as well as the lead up to WWE's WrestlePalooza. If you haven't already, make sure you like the video, comment down below. That way you can take part in the discussion. And if you want to get into the chat, Make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way you can stay up to date with all things pro wrestling and include yourself in the live streams itself. We are going to continue to try to grow this channel, get to 10,000 by the end of the year. And if you're feeling ever so inclined, make sure to join the Main Event Mafia, where we're going to have an exclusive video uploaded tomorrow. That's going to be tomorrow, Friday, September 5th. We're going to do a monthly exclusive video where I talk about some of the best pro wrestling matches of all time. Of course, up to you guys in the chat. This month it was voted to have Unbreakable 2005 total nonstop action. It was AJ Styles versus Samoa Joe, Christopher Daniels in a legendary triple threat match. If you want to know my thoughts and opinions on that matchup and the legacy it left behind, make sure you join the Main Event Mafia and get access to that exclusive video. Also, make sure to join us and follow on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at JAreaPod_. That's at JAreaPod_. You can find that top corner over here. Make sure you guys join the chat. Make sure you guys subscribe. Can't do this without you guys. Nothing but love and support on my end. Can't wait to see you guys on Monday. Everyone have a great weekend. Be safe. Take care. Enjoy Friday Night SmackDown. And I'll be seeing you guys again on this upcoming Monday's stream following Monday Night Raw. Everyone have a great night. Take care. We'll see you then.